Let's testify tonight.
Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the word of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it out. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
All right, how you guys doing today? So my super secret Borg project is coming along, for those of you that care about that, but it's still going to probably take several weeks, if not a couple of months, to get it done. I'm just hoping to get it done by the end of summer. But let's see. So, going to the chat. Don't really have a particular topic for you guys today. Wouldn't want to anger Darren by talking about any current events. So, we'll just see what you guys have in the chat after I were done complaining about me being late, which I'm sorry. Yeah, I just had some minor technical difficulties to deal with. Let's see. Josiah says can't stay long because he's going to go to church, so that's fine. Church comes first. Let's see. Suzuki Mitsu. I'm not, I don't know. However you pronounce that name. Well, this many people need to cope. God is imaginary. Stop ruining music. Okay, whatever. Look, if you have something that you want to say, if you have an argument you want to put forward, anything like that, I welcome it. If you just want to be a dick, go somewhere else. Uh, not a fan of any religion, especially Christianity and Abrahamic ones. Well, I don't know why you're so bitter and angry about religion. I mean, you know you want to. Here's the problem. People like yourself tend to come on to live streams like this, and you just talk about how everything we believe is wrong, how we, don't know what you're talking about or anything like that, but you don't have anything of any substance to say, which tells me you just don't like religion for whatever reason. It's just an emotional response. It has nothing to do with anything that you're thinking about considering logically or rationally. So, you have fun with that. Darren says, go ahead and talk about whatever you want. The show isn't really church life anymore anyway. And there's Darren with his standard snide comment. Thank you, Darren. Godzone with the $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Talk like Ziggy the Clown. I'm not even sure who Ziggy the Clown is, so I guess I can't really do that, Godzone. Sorry. And then Suzuki is leaving, saying, have a magically enchanted day. Well, why? I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but, maybe you do. Stan asking why his ways. Well, people like that, I mean, they're obviously what they're hoping most of the time. Obviously I don't know. Suzuki may be a different sort, but most of the time when people do this kind of behavior, it's because they're just trolls. They don't really have an argument about God. They may or may not even care about the whole God debate, so to speak. They just want to piss people off. And, barking up the wrong tree here, because if I can handle Darren and Alex Bogey, I can certainly handle some troll atheist that wants to say what you believe is imaginary. But whatever. We have professional grade trolls around here with the likes of Darren and Alex. The amateur trolls, you go get some practice. Do you go scroll through the religious channels Sunday morning to troll them? Probably. You got nothing better to do. I mean, he doesn't have church to go to, so got to kill the time somehow. Hard to get a job, with all the neck tattoos and stuff, but, that's a whole other thing. I meant to talk tight like a clown. Well, howdy ho, everybody. This is Salty, the grumpy old clown. There you go. I can only make so much. I don't really want to donate to God. I always tell people, never, ever, ever give more than you can afford. As much as I want all your money, I don't want it to the point where you go broke. Oh, you want me to be snide? Sorry, I'll out of snide today. Just stating a fact. This isn't really a church live stream anymore. It's not even in the title. Darren, again, you don't like it. Nobody's pointing a gun at your head and making you stay around. And so, church life is just kind of the name of the series, if you will, particularly Sunday morning live streams. Now maybe your church has an absolutely strict, when you come in the door, every sentence you say better have Jesus in it or it doesn't count because you're in church. You know, I live in a little place called Earth, so whatever. Robert in the house says, Shalom today, Salty Checker. Shalom. Shalom, Robert. So I guess you have heard about Ted Turner passing away. Unfortunately, he's in hell for eternity. He didn't believe in God or Yeshua, unfortunately. I try, okay, so let me say this. When it comes to people who pass away, even even the most extreme cases like Christopher Hitchens or assuming I outlive Richard Dawkins or Thunderfoot, all the atheists out there that are just Delahunty is a good one. All the atheists out there that are just very very strong anti-theistic types, which I don't think Ted Turner quite falls into that category, but I'm just making a point here. I do not say, like, for example, with Christopher Hitchens, I do not proclaim that Christopher Hitchens is in hell or going to hell. And you might say, but why, Salty? It's so flippin' obvious. If Christianity is true, then clearly someone who believes the kind of stuff that Christopher Hitchens was saying would be on his way to hell. And I would agree with you. However, you are assuming that Christopher Hitchens actually believes that stuff. I don't know what was in Christopher Hitchens' heart the moment he died. I genuinely do not. And I would hope, I know it's not likely, but I would hope that, at the last minute, he had some kind of deathbed conversion that was genuine, and that I could debate with him in heaven, I could just see him walking up to a podium with his kind of pompous British attitude at a debate in heaven, going, "Oh well, this is awkward." I would live for that. But I don't know what was in Ted Turner's heart, and so I do not judge. I understand he may have proclaimed that he was a atheist. I never really followed Ted Turner on anything. I know who he was from a business perspective, but I didn't follow like any of his personal rantings about anything. So didn't, I generally don't that's why, like with actors, I don't think that a movie's going to suck just because an actor is a crazy liberal. Like people right now have been going off about Mark Ruffalo, how they need to get a different actor to play the Hulk because Mark Ruffalo is so woke or whatever. And it's like, you know what? I don't care how woke Mark Ruffalo is. That has nothing to do with his performance on screen. Stan asking Darren to suggest a topic. That'll be interesting if he does. And let's see, Robert saying shalom to Street Preacher. Probably in hell for colorizing old movies. Yeah, that was him. Oh, you're so full of sunshine and rainbows. Oh, that's Salty the Grumpy Clown. Yes, indeed. In fact, he walks around going, "Hey, kid, you want a rainbow? Too bad." Let's see. Same one I suggested last week, glorified bodies. It's a topic. Watch him add an unnecessary qualifier in order to blow it off. I don't know what an unnecessary qualifier would be, but okay, what about glorified bodies, Darren? I, I understand that is a topic, just like I could say light bulbs is a topic, but do you have a particular opinion you are trying to put forth? Or are you just saying, hey, glorified bodies, discuss? Because I'd be more than happy to, I don't know where you're coming from. And so if you want to say, hey, I think that here's what happens with glorified bodies, or I think that glorified bodies is kind of an exaggerated doctrine, or whatever you want to say, I'd be more than happy to delve into it. But just saying glorified bodies, I need more to work with. It's a subject more than a topic, I guess. I mean, when I mean that, it's a generalized subject. It's like United States is a subject, right? But if I was to say, the decision to drop the atomic bomb at the end of World War II, right or wrong, that's a discussion topic. Maybe you can see that, Darren. Maybe you're just going to think that I'm hand waving away your topic, but I don't know what you want to discuss. I was watching a clip from Caleb Hammer, who does financial audits on people. A broke woman was tithing 10% of all the money she received, but she was in debt. He suggested she pause her tithing until her finances were in better shape and she could donate even more to the church. I know you tithe 10% of all income, but it is better to pause tithing if you're in debt and to make up for the donations when you're in better financial shape. That's actually an interesting question when it comes to tithing. So many churches will try to tell you that you should absolutely tithe no matter what. But the obvious reason for churches to do this is it supports their finances. So for example, if I wanted to say, hey, everybody that watches this live stream, if this is your church, you should be giving me 10% of your income no matter what, because it honors God. Am I really saying that because it honors God, or am I saying that because I would like to get 10% of your income? And I tend to think of it this way. Tithing, and particularly as a New Testament concept, is something you should do. But when you start saying, okay, you have to give 10% of any and all income, because technically that's what a tithe is a tenth. That's what the word means. And if you don't tithe, that somehow you are not a Christian. Well, then I think you run into a little problem. And that problem comes in the form of Jesus himself. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I think it's there. Let's try that one. So I apologize. I can't get the Bible on the screen for you right now because of the technical problems that I was having. One of my monitors is not on, so I can only see one screen at a time. All right. So, right here, this is in the book of Matthew, chapter 23. And Jesus, as he commonly does, is having a conversation with the Pharisees. In fact, let me see. I might be able to do this despite. Let's see. And of course, wants my PIN number, blah, blah, blah. All right. All right. And so let's do that. All right. Go back to. This is going to look weird for a second at least, but let's see if I can get this to work. Share screen, window. All right, so yeah, now if we switch to this, there we go. Okay, kind of. So I can't see the chat right now, but I can. So this is where the tithing concept comes from. Why am I seeing an ad when I'm signed in? I do not know. But get rid of that. All right. So Jesus is having a conversation with the Pharisees, and among other things, he does in fact mention tithing, and it's a mention in passing, but I think it kind of sums up where we should be when it comes to the idea of tithing. So I'm going to start going. I'm going to go back a little way so you can kind of hear the tone of the conversation as it leads into this. So this is chapter 23 of Matthew, starting at verse 13. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door in the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over the land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing, but if anyone swears by the gift on the altar is bound by an oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and anyone who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and the one who sits on it. All right, so here we go. This is where he actually mentions tithing. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, or however you say that. I think it's a spice. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. So, what is he saying here? Well, is he saying you don't need to tithe? Not at all. In fact, he affirmed the idea of tithing here. But he is also saying that tithing is secondary to things like justice and mercy and everything like that. And there is, I would say this, when it comes to people who struggle financially, I find it offensive to the core when a church teaches that if you just tithe, your finances will be better. Because tithing does not guarantee financial stability. Tithing is your obligation as a follower in order to support the church community. However, and this is the part that a lot of people tend to trying to think of the right way to put it without sounding like a complete jerk, but a lot of churches miss the boat on this. Even a lot of really good churches miss the boat on this. And that is that if there's two problems here. One, not everybody tithes, and two, the church is not living up to its financial obligations to its membership. And they're linked because the church cannot do the latter unless the people do the former. If everybody in a church tithed, then that would mean that the church's income would go up dramatically. Like, for example, our church is way above the national average when it comes to tithing. And so, but even in our church, less than half of the people currently tithe. Not, a couple of years ago, the numbers were much better. They were more like 70%. But our church has increased in size, and unfortunately, many of the newer people in the church don't seem to be tithers, based on the numbers at least. But if a little less than half of the membership is actually tithing, and then a member falls into a financial struggle, well, the church may not have the readily available funds to help that person. But if everybody in a church was tithing, then that church would easily have what it needs to make sure that anybody who is in a very bad place financially would get relief from the church. Which is, the church is supposed to do that. It's, read the book of Acts. It's all over the place in Acts. So, should you tithe? Yes, you absolutely should. However, if you are in that bad a financial situation, the church should be helping you. The problem is twofold. So if we just sit there and say, well, I'm not going to tithe because, I've got bills to pay. And if I give 10% of my income to the church, I can't pay my bills. If that's true, all right, and I'm not being facetious here, I'm being absolutely serious. If that is true, if tithing would break you to the point where you could not pay your bills that otherwise you could pay, then that must mean, assuming you're being an honest person, you never, ever, under any circumstances, go out to eat. You do not have cable TV. You don't have home internet. You don't have, unless it's a necessary part of your job or something and it's provided by work. You don't have any luxury of any kind. Now, the honest truth is that we all have some luxuries in our lives. And I know that for a fact because you're here right now. Which means, at the very least, you either have a smartphone or high-speed internet at home. Or both. So, I think that we need to be very careful about thinking that just because you're in debt is not a license to not tithe. If you're in that, say, and our church actually has a program for this. We're actually in the application process even as we speak because we ran into a situation with our family. But where our church, if an unexpected expense or whatever comes up and it's something beyond your means, then our church will step in and help. They will not give you cash, but they will pay your creditors if you can, but you have to demonstrate what the bill is. And, if your bill is for cable TV or a brand new smartphone, they're going to say, yeah, go take a hike. And Godwin says, LOL, I got blocked. You got blocked? By who? The auditor thought it was crazy that someone who was like $50,000 in debt was still donating 10% of any income she did have. Well, the larger question is, why is she $50,000 in debt? Is that because 50,000 in debt doesn't sound like a mortgage, at least not in most areas. That sounds, and if she's got $50,000 in revolving debts, credit cards, a car payment, miscellaneous stuff, that's way too much debt. Because I will tell you, even at our worst, we don't have anywhere near that much debt outside of the mortgage. Ultimately, you should try to live debt free. But assuming you have a mortgage, because in modern society they're almost unavoidable if you want to own a home, assuming you have a mortgage, that should be ideally your only debt. But then you might have a mortgage and a car payment, which is our situation because, got to pay for the car, didn't have cash for it. So if you are trying to do a mortgage and a car payment, okay, but then you have credit cards, and are you abusing the credit cards? Are and that becomes a major problem for a lot of people. So this person may have a major debt problem that they need to deal with, but unless they have no luxury things in their home at all, no cell phones, no cable TV, no, subscription services, then it's very likely that they could do the 10% tithing and still make their obligations. If not, then they need to look at alternatives like bankruptcy, or we're asking their church for help. But I don't think that we should just say, well, I'm not going to tithe. Now, all that being said, Christ made it clear that tithing is secondary to things like justice and mercy. So, if you don't tithe, do I think you're going to hell? No, not at all. But I do think you're supposed to tithe. And so I don't think you should ever, as a Christian, tell a fellow Christian, yeah, you don't need to tithe. Sorry, sinus is acting up again. That's just my whole thing. Okay, Godson, continuing from before. I got blocked by a pagan on Twitter who hates on Christian and Jews on Twitter and Rumble. He blocked me because I keep calling him out. Well, like I said, if somebody is seriously just flinging hate, I'm genuinely not interested. What I care about is when somebody throws out what they think is a logical, coherent argument against the truth claims of Christianity or the existence of God. What I'm not a big fan of, though, and this is, and it's not, it's kind of a weird. I don't want to call it a slippery slope, but I guess I'm not sure what the right word for it is, but I'm not really into debating with atheists about the finer points of Christian theology. So, for example, were Adam and Eve two literal people, or was the entire Garden of Eden story a metaphor, that kind of thing? That's a discussion I enjoy having with my fellow Christians, but not so much with atheists, because what atheists tend to do is to frame the argument in the form of a straw man to suggest that in order to be a Christian, you have to believe that that Adam and Eve were the only two people in existence 6,000 years ago, which was 6 days after the earth itself was created. And if you don't believe that, you're not a Christian. And the reason that many atheists try to frame it that way is it's a classic straw man. You try to find what you see as the weakest form of Christianity and argue against that rather than argue against whatever the Christian may be saying. Now, if you're talking to a young earth creationist, fine, maybe that's a legitimate argument. But if you're talking to me, that's generally not a legitimate argument. I don't take the young earth creationist stance on things, nor, by the way, do I take an old earth, what is it, creation, what is it, creationist evolution or evolutionary creationism or whatever it's called these days. I don't take that stance either. I simply say that when I read Genesis, for the most part, I don't concern myself with whether or not it's meant to be a literalistic depiction of the creation, as much as it's a depiction of the relationship between God, man, and Earth, or the world, if you will, the cosmos, and that's the important thing. The important thing is not whether or not it was 6,000 years ago and a week that the world was created. That's not important. And so, but with atheists, I prefer to talk about, does God exist? Because that's where our fundamental disagreement is. Otherwise, you would be an atheist. If you call yourself a, say, you're a agnostic theist, right? Meaning, that you don't have any particular God belief, but you believe that there is a God. You're just a general theist. Now we can have a different level of discussion as to why I think that the Christian interpretation of God is more correct than alternatives. But if I'm talking to a fellow Christian, or for that matter, a Jew or Muslim, about an Old Testament issue, so say like the slavery laws or something like that, now we have a common ground because we all accept that the Torah is the Word of God, and so we can accept that as authoritative and use that as a reference point for a discussion. If I'm talking to a fellow Christian, let's say I'm arguing with a Calvinist about the existence of free will, well, again, we can use the Old and New Testament, but we have to be careful because there's some people that will out of hand reject certain translations of the Bible, or even some will reject anything other than, say, the King James translation of the Bible. The King James only crowd, I find honestly kind of laughable from a analytical standpoint, because there is absolutely no reason that the King James would be the only true preserved word of God. But many people say, "But look, they changed it because in the NIV, this passage or this passage are a little different, or this line is gone, or this line was added, or whatever." And so they say, see, the authors of the NIV are trying to fundamentally change the Word of God, except that that's not what's going on there. And anybody who has actually examined the scholarship behind the translation of the NIV and HCSV and all these other translations, you would know this, that in actuality, it's the King James Bible that is less accurate because we had less manuscript evidence when the King James was translated. Whereas we have more evidence now, and so we have a more accurate picture of what is actually contained in the Bible. And I presume that, a couple hundred years from now, we'll probably have more evidence than we have right now. So that's a neat thing about archaeological evidence, is that you never completely run out. Stan says I'll have to Google that one, the glorified bodies. Well, again, I just want to know if there's anything in particular about glorified bodies. Because I know that's a topic that some churches get really big on. Some churches hardly talk about them at all. And the idea is just that after the resurrection, that we would have some kind of perfected body that because the resurrection, and it's very clear if you read what Jesus says, and also what's written later on about the resurrection. It is a physical resurrection. It's not like you don't live as a spirit. You're not floating around, like a ghost or something. It is a physical resurrection. You have a physical body, just as physical and real as the one you have right now. The glorified body concept is the idea that the body that you receive after the resurrection, it will still be you, but it will be a flawless version of you. So the question that I'm actually kind of looking it up now to try and see where most of that comes from. And it looks like Philippians is where the most commonly, and then there's Corinthians. So we'll take a look at both. So, so Philippians 3, and bear with me, guys. All right. And then what's the other one? The other one is 1 Corinthians. All right. And not Acts. 1 Corinthians, I think it's at 15, right? Yes, 42. All right, so let's take a look at this. So, what does the Bible actually say on the topic? And all right, let's switch to over here. Might be a little weird because I'm trying to do this in a different way. Yes, I'll move this over a little bit. That may gives me a little bit more room. All right. All right, so this is Philippians chapter 3, and right here at the very end of the chapter, and this is actually the end of the book, if I believe. Let's see if we go to Philippians. Cannot. Oh no, there's one more chapter. So there's the penultimate chapter of Philippians. However, at the very end of this particular chapter, there's a little section that says, following Paul's example. And it says, all of us then who are mature should take such a view of things, the stuff he's been talking about in the previous chapters, mostly about focusing on Christ and that kind of thing. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. Join together in following my examples, brothers and sisters, just as you have us as a model. Keep your eyes on those who live as we do. For as I have often told you before, and now tell you again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is set on earthly things. That's an interesting way to put it. Their God is their stomach. It's like you're just following your earthly desires, is what he's talking about. Not necessarily it's just about food, but food is a big driver of these kinds of things. Your God is in the sensations that you get on this earth. You are a hedonist. But our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who, by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control, will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. So, right there is where you actually get the term glorified body. But the interesting thing about Jesus' post resurrection, and this is something I've kind of wrestled with a little bit, and I don't know necessarily what the answer to this is, but you'll notice that when Jesus talks to, like, Thomas in that famous discussion, he still has the wounds on his hands and his side from the crucifixion. And he's still recognizable as Jesus. So he doesn't look like jacked up Jesus that's, on weight gainer and, all that. He just looks like Jesus. I mean, at least there's no description of him looking significantly different. And the fact that Thomas could put his fingers into the wounds means that the wounds are still there. So that kind of throws a monkey wrench in the idea that many churches put there out that your glorified body will be perfect in every way. So if you are currently fat like me, you will be, fit and trim when you are resurrected. If you are currently, if you had a leg cut off in an accident, it'll be back, that kind of thing. At least based on the example of Jesus after the resurrection, may not necessarily be true. But let's take a look at the other passage about it. And that was Philippians. Now we're going to go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And there's a whole section about the resurrected body here. So let's take a look. So this is for you, Darren. I hope you're actually watching. I can't see the chat very well right now, but I do hope that you are with us still. So the resurrected body. But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? How foolish! What you saw does not come to life. What you sow does not come to life until it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but the seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. But God gives it a body as he has determined. To each kind of seed, he gives its own body. Not all flesh is the same. People have one kind of flesh, animals have another, birds have another, and fish another. Kind of an interesting way to put that. Now, obviously modern classification of biology doesn't exist 2,000 years ago. But the common terms here are that he's classifying different types of flesh as being human, animal, birds, and fish. And those are all kind of different types of creatures. And so I just find that interesting. There are also heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies, but the splendor of the heavenly bodies is one kind, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is another. The sun has one kind of splendor, the moon another, and the stars another. And a star differs from a star in splendor. Another interesting thing about that particular passage, and again, I'm not trying to suggest that the Bible is a science text, it certainly is not. But to the casual observer looking at stars in the sky, what most people believed at that time was that the stars were all pretty much the same. They were just scattered about in different places around the sky, but they were all pretty much the same thing. And Jesus here is separating stars into classifications, even though he doesn't break it down further, and which is something that, astrophysicists do today, as far as, whether the star is a red giant, a blue giant, a white dwarf, a main sequence star, a black hole, a neutron star, all these things that are very different from each other. So it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being, the last Adam, a life giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, and the second man is of heaven, meaning Christ. As was the earthly man, so there are those are of the earth, and so is the heavenly man, so are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that the flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true: death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know what your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So, this is a very rich passage that, you could write an entire thesis on. You could probably write a dozen of them on some of the various things that are stated here. But does it straight up say, by the way, when you're resurrected, your body is going to look awesome compared to what it looks like now? No, it says it's going to be glorified, but it doesn't really define what that means. It says it will be like how Christ was glorified, but Christ's glorified body included the wounds of his crucifixion. So I guess the honest answer after all of that is I don't think that that there is a clear, precise answer to what the glorified bodies will be. Let's see. Ted Turner made public statements he didn't believe in God or Yeshua. He was also a supporter of population control, and there are many people that there's too many people on the earth. Yeah, I've heard people say that he said stuff like that. But like I said, no matter what he says publicly, neither you nor I know what was in his heart. And I choose, when it comes to the passing of someone, to simply hope that they were in the right place. But, you know, that's between them and God. God is good and God is just. What about Trump's latest thing about National Sabbath Day for all Americans? Yes, seems like Trump is in the pocket of the Jews. You know, I heard a little snippet about Trump doing something about a national Sabbath. I haven't looked into it in any detail to find out exactly what that's supposed to mean. So I don't really have a strong opinion on it. I don't know if it's just another federal declared holiday that is meaningless or if there's anything to it. So I'd have to do some research on that. I'm sorry, Robert. Okay, glorified body is what humans are supposed to receive after death. They're Christians. Well, I went over as best I could, and even though Darren is absolutely convinced that I wasn't going to talk about it, we'll see if he eats crow because I didn't see any of these comments until after I just did all that. But knowing Darren, he'll just say that I didn't do it well enough or something. Is glorified body just the heavenly body? Well, yeah, we went through the scripture on it. So you tell me. It's Mike's show. He could, at the very least, define the topic and then go for there, but he won't. Well, you're right with the first three words. It's my show. I don't need to give you a topic. I don't owe you a topic. If you want a show that has a specific topic every week, there are lots of shows that do that. At least for right now, because of the place I'm in my life and the lack of preparation time that I have, I'm kind of free flow. And I'm going to do that for a little while until I can get things more stabilized. I am trying my best to get our lives into a more stable position. It's been very difficult. We've had a very difficult couple of years. And I don't need to be lectured by a troll that wants to come on and tell me how to run my show. And that seems to be all you've ever wanted to do with me, Darren. You keep telling me how to run my channel. And I understand that some of the things you say are logical and correct. For example, for those of you that don't know, Darren advised me not to talk about religion on this channel because the numbers would drop like the proverbial rock. And they have. He was right about that. However, the choice I made was not because it was the better financial choice. Obviously, it wasn't. It was because it was the honorable thing to do. It was the honest thing to do. Because I couldn't continue the way that this channel was. And that's why I'm getting things together for the Salty Plus channel, because I'm going to put nerd content on there, but it's going to be a slightly different flavor than the old anti-trekker stuff was. But I am working on my super secret Borg project here. That's going to be really cool when it's done. Ludacris versus Ice Cube, the rapper, in a fist fight. Well, Ludacris definitely has youth on Ice Cube. But, Ice Cube being made of ice automatically gets Vanilla Ice in his corner. So now it's 2-on-1. Now, granted, Vanilla Ice isn't going to be that much of a threat, but it's enough to at least distract Ludacris while Ice Cube does his work. So I'm going to have to give it to Ice Cube. Because, Ludacris, I don't see having anybody automatically on his side. Well, but then again, you could argue that Ludacris, because he's a big part of the Fast and Furious franchise, and it's all about family, is going to get Vin Diesel and his crew on his side. So I might have to give it to Ludacris for that. Unprepared, very unprofessional. Yes, indeed. By define the topic, I mean define what a glorified body is. He won't even do that for the members of his audience who don't know what that is, which I already did. But Darren is, going to rant because he's Darren. Crouching Taylor's Hidden Swift is in the house. Good to see you. Hope you are well. Do not understand Swifties. I really don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't throw hate at Taylor Swift, but I don't think she's all that great either. It's like, this whole thing with the Billie Eilish, however you say your name. And, people, like, they're making, what's his name? James Cameron is making a concert film for her that's coming out in a week or two. And in the trailers for it, it says, she has changed music. He has changed movies. Together they make the ultimate concert film. And I'm like, how has she changed music? To me, she's just another generic pop star. And I kind of feel the same way about Taylor Swift. They're very popular, but that doesn't. But I don't see them as innovative in any way. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but because I don't listen to their music, so I fully accept that I could be wrong. But the little bit that I have heard of both of them, it just sounds like generic pop music to me. That's interesting. I always thought of heaven more like ascension and Stargate becoming pure energy of spirit. No, that is absolutely not correct. It is true that the resurrection, a lot of people think that we're living in, like, because even like the one passage that said, oh, we're going to have, we will have spiritual bodies. And so when people hear that, they think, oh, we're going to be like ghosts or apparitions or, yeah, beings of pure energy. That we're going to look like the Organians or something. But what we see as far as how it's written is no, we're gonna be physical beings. We're just not going to be bound by the sinful nature that we have now, which I, for one, am looking forward to. But it seems you're right. We will not have disembodied spirits will have form and solidity. And then you mentioned Luke 24. I haven't read that one, obviously, when I was talking about it, but let's see. It's only 2 verses, so let's switch over to, where is it? So it's Luke 24. 39:40. Yeah, that's where what I was talking about before. So this is post resurrection, and backing up a couple of verses to 36. So while they're still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." Now this is kind of funny because the disciples are in a room together having a meal. And then Jesus just kind of appears in the room and says, "Peace be with you." I always thought that was like Jesus was being a little bit of a prankster there. I'm sure that he scared the crap out of the apostles at that point. But I just like he was like, "Peace be with you," and everybody was like freaking out. But and in fact, the next verse, they were frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do doubts rise in your mind? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet, and while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. So notice this is showing you a couple of things. After the resurrection, he still has the wounds in his hands and feet. Of course, in the conversation with Thomas, he actually shows the wound in his side as well. And he eats food. So at least one of the great pleasures in life will exist post resurrection, and that is eating. I hope that the other one exists as well, but there's no mention of it. And Josiah's off to church. Take it easy. And then Darren says, tithing is very important, certainly more important than spending that money on things like tattoos and autographs. Agreed. So if you are making a choice between tithing and getting a new tattoo, then that's not a choice. That's you being selfish. I think that tithing, the only time that tithing really should be even thought of as, oh, maybe we won't do it this month, is if you have some kind of unexpected expense that goes above and beyond what your means are, to where you actually need help from the church to pay. Not just because, you got a tight budget. Too many people in our society buy what they want and beg for what they need. That is very true, Darren. And then Stan puts a YouTube short in there. I'm not sure what it was because, I can't click on that from this screen. I'd have to go to another screen to see it. Which It's really annoying that you guys love to do this because now, because I'm dying of curiosity, I got to load the stream. Let's see your channel. Go to pause that because don't care. Da, da, da. Um, all right, there's Street Preacher's thing. Let's see what. All right, so I assume this is what got the whole tithing thing started. Um, So yeah, he's trying to say from a pragmatic standpoint that it's better to get out of debt and then you can donate more, which I understand. But at the same time, the church needs to be able to function. And if everybody just waits until they have enough money before they donate to the church, then the church will never be funded. And if the church isn't funded, then how's the church supposed to help people? You run into a little catch 22 there. So, as far as where now, the one thing I would say that I think that she was a little wonky on is tithing on something like an insurance check. And I know there are some people that do it. So let me talk about that for just a second. So let's say that in her case, she was in a car accident, and I'm assuming the car was totaled or whatever, and the insurance company gives her. She said she got like 5 or 6 grand. So that money is not income. That money is to replace that which was taken from you in the accident. The purpose of the insurance is to make you whole again. So, and in fact, the interesting thing is you notice that if you get an insurance payout like that, you know what you don't have to do? Pay taxes on it. You know why? Because it's not income, it's reimbursement. And so presumably if you are a tither, then like so for example, every month I get my social security check from the government. My wife sends 10% straight to the church, right? That's just done right off the top. Now, if for example, let's say that her car gets totaled and they gave us, 6 grand for it. Well, we've been tithing on our income this whole time. So the money that we used to purchase the car initially, although ironically that was actually from an insurance payout, but we'll just pretend that we paid for it out of our own pockets. But so the money that you paid for the car, you already tithed on. So you do not need to tithe on it again when you're being reimbursed for the loss of your car. So I would say that there. Now, granted, if she feels convicted and she wants to, that's fine. But I think that it would be dangerous for people to say if you get an insurance payout or you win money in a lawsuit or something like that, then you need to tithe right away. No, you're supposed to tithe based on basically what your income is. And so if if you get Social Security, 10% of that. If you have a job, 10% of that. If you have a money market fund that makes money for you, 10% of the profits. Right. But it's not like, say, if you have stock investments, you don't have to simply take 10% of your portfolio and give it to the church every year. You take 10% of the profits and give it to the church. So, I think tithing is good, but you do need to use a little bit of common sense as to what should and should not be tithed from. And then Marion says, "Intelligent design?" Question mark. Well, again, do you have? Is there something about intelligent design that you're curious about? Because I will say this: Intelligent design theory is not really a theory. And so I don't like it as a scientific principle, because the idea of intelligent design is to basically you say, look at the universe. It just looks so orderly, it looks so well crafted and everything. There must be a designer behind it. And then we start looking at things in biology, and we'll say, well, there's no way that these cells could have simply formed by accident, and so there must be an intelligence behind it. Because even the most simple life requires DNA and RNA to function, and DNA and RNA are far too complex to randomly come together. Now, those are all good philosophical arguments about the nature of things. They are not scientific theory. Now, on the flip side, and this is where I get pissed off at people like Richard Dawkins, I would equally say that it is not scientific to say, for example, in evolutionary theory, that there are random mutations and natural selection that drive evolution. Because to say the word random is a unwarranted assumption. It's entirely possible that there is a God that has set the mutations in advance. It is entirely possible that the mutations are completely predictable if we understood some fundamental thing about radiation or about biology that we just don't understand yet. So to say it's random is, I think, an unwarranted assumption. However, if you are to say that mutation and natural selection are the driving force of evolution, I would have no problem. So in that particular case, I think that we make. I think the reason that they put things like random mutation in there is to do the opposite of intelligent design, to try to imply that there is not a God. And unfortunately, this betrays the core principle of science. I'm not even talking about religion here. It betrays the core principle of science, of agnosticism. And this, agnosticism came about because of evolutionary biology, because the idea was that we should not, as scientists, ever assume there is or is not a God. Instead, we simply follow the evidence. And theories should not be written with the assumption of the divine or the assumption of no divine. They should be written based on what we can see and what we can show. So, what we can see and show with evolution is that it would appear that there are mutations in DNA that can create randomized effects on the greater being, on the macroscopic being. And if these effects are beneficial, then that trait tends to be passed on to more because that person or thing would reproduce more. But if it's not beneficial for reproduction, then it will probably disappear or just remain a odd anomaly. Let's see. Seems to be rampant for people on EBT. They could afford food. They just don't want to spend their money on food. Their money is for fun stuff. Food should just be provided. I think that's an unfair assumption about people on EBT. I told you my son gets SNAP benefits, and based on the paltry amount that he is, and keep in mind, no, so my son is autistic. He's considered fully disabled, and if you took his entire Social Security, and it is not even half of what he would need to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment in this town. Now, add on to that, so yes, hey, Social Security is not the only benefit he gets because he gets Medicare. Great. Medicare pays 80% of your medical expenses if they're approved by Medicare. So, how do you pay the other 20% if 100% of your money is going to pay rent? Oh, but you get Section 8. Well, oh, you see, these people are just screwing us over with Section 8 housing. You see, and that's the problem. We think that, oh, they're getting all these benefits and they're just, living on the dole and they're just having a party every day. But the truth is, the amounts that people get from the government on these programs are not enough to live on. That's why it's very common for people who are on assistance of some kind to be living with a bunch of other people because sometimes to the point where there's an illegal number of people living in a place. Like you might have a 2-bedroom apartment that has 10 people living in it because that's the only way they can afford to live, you know? But if you, the funny thing is, so people will give someone, $100 a month to buy food, and then you have people like, RFK Jr. sitting there saying how all these people should not be drinking soda or eating chips, but rather they should be eating organic, healthy foods, which are much more expensive than soda and chips. So the problem is that even if you want to say this is for good, healthy, organic foods, well, then you're going to have to quadruple the amount of money you give people. Because good luck going to Whole Foods and filling your stomach for a month for $100. Good luck. Darren says, doesn't follow racial lines either. I met white folks who have $60,000 in student loans, but they have 6-foot TV in their living room. Well, that's not out of the ordinary. I mean, you can get mad at people for not being particularly miserly, which I understand. But at the same time, that's not our place as Christians. I mean, if that's what you want to do is point the finger at people and say how terrible they are, you go right ahead. I'm more interested in, hey, you know what? Show them the love of Christ. And the love of Christ isn't, like for example, if you look at the woman who was caught in adultery, she never in that story was she exonerated of the charge of adultery, right? She was guilty. So, and what did Jesus tell her? Sin no more. But he didn't sit there and shame her all day about it, right? He just, basically prevented the Pharisees from kind of being dicks about it and saying, well, get to stone her to death. And so he stopped the Pharisees from doing that. And then, said, okay, well, now don't be doing that anymore. And that was it, right? The Samaritan woman at the well. There's a woman who was married several times, was shacking up with a guy who she wasn't married to at the time that she met Jesus. And Jesus called her out on all of it, right? He absolutely did. But you know what he didn't do? He didn't rail on her about it. After he said what she had done, he talked to her about salvation and following him, not about how terrible she was for not doing things the right way. Don't they deserve to treat themselves? So when you're talking about, and that is another part of the equation when you're talking about the EBT and stuff, because do I, now depending on the reason that the person is getting assistance, assuming that the reason they're getting assistance is because they are disabled, because other than the elderly, that would be the most common thing. And if the reason that they're getting assistance is because they're disabled, yeah, I don't think that we should just give them enough to survive and that's it. And say, shame on you if you ever want a treat. Shame on you if you ever want to see a movie. Shame on you if you want to do anything other than, sit and meditate and eat whole grain foods and, do nothing. You know, I don't believe that that's how we're meant to treat the disabled in this country. I think that we should be letting them live, while not maybe not a lavish lifestyle, but at least one where they don't have to panic every month about paying the bills and maybe have enough extra to do something fun once or twice a week. I don't think that that is a particularly bad thing. I think that people should be able to have some basic level of communication. That means a smartphone, probably means home internet, and some base level entertainment, cable TV or a couple of streaming services. I don't think that that's out of the question, especially in our society. We can absolutely afford that. The problem is what we're doing is we're pissing away money as a government on all sorts of things, and then we blame the people that are receiving benefits like it's their fault. Like, oh, we couldn't possibly spend money to help people with their health care, from that bill from the Obama administration that expired at the beginning of the year, right? Oh, no, we can't afford that. But we can apparently afford an unprovoked war with Iran, which costs more, by the way. And so we can apparently afford all sorts of wonderful things in Washington, like renaming buildings in Trump's honor while he's still president. We got plenty of money for that, but no, we don't have any money for food stamps. I'm sorry. Our federal government is, and by the way, look at, I mean, what they just asked for, and I don't know what the status is of their request, but was the Department of I don't remember if it's Homeland Security or whatever it is, but I know that it's whatever, ICE is in it, but I don't remember if it's just Homeland Security or if it's whatever. But they're asking for a 50% increase in their budget. And they now want to have just as much spent on them as we spend on Social Security. What? I thought everything was going so groovy. According to Trump, everything is great. Iran has been destroyed like 8 times over now, right? Why do we need to bolster the budget of Homeland Security if Homeland is so secure? Like to know that one. Oh, look, he actually defined that topic. Woo, surprising. And there's Darren just being a jerk. It's like pulling teeth with him sometimes. Pulling teeth? You asked for the topic. I asked you to clarify. You didn't, so I defined the topic as best I could. You know, if Darren, I know you'll just like being a jerk, but come on, man. Translation argument has been brought up over the upcoming Odyssey movie. Seems Nolan based on a very modern translation that's criticized for using language that alters the original intent. I'm amazed that it's even possible to accurately translate texts as old as the Odyssey or even the Bible. Well, in some cases, I could, like for example, with the Bible, Hebrew, while ancient Hebrew is a dialect that's not really used anymore, but Hebrew is a language that's still in existence. It's not spoken commonly by a lot of people, but it still is a language. Greek is actually a language still used, among other things, in science quite a bit. Like if you start taking advanced mathematics, guess what? You better learn the Greek alphabet. In Star Trek, they don't use all those Greek symbols just to be fancy. Those are, because they use them because in mathematics, those symbols are commonly used. And so if you look at the New Testament was written in Greek and Aramaic. The earliest translations were translated into Latin, and so the nice thing is that you can then look at the Greek and Aramaic manuscripts. You can compare it to some of the early Latin translations, and where they don't line up, then you can try to apply some critical thinking to see what's correct in order to get the most accurate modern translation. As far as the Odyssey, I don't know enough about it to know. I don't even know if what the intent of the Odyssey really was. So never read it. So I'm looking forward to the Christopher Nolan movie because Nolan, while I think he is somewhat overrated, is a talented filmmaker. So just based on mysterious symbols carved into clay tablets. Well, that's again a matter of perspective. Mysterious symbols, if you've never seen the language before, sure. If you're someone that doesn't know anything about Hebrew and you see this tattoo on my wrist, you're like, well, what the heck is that? But if you know anything about Hebrew, you'd say, oh, that's the number 23 in Hebrew. You know. So it's mysterious symbols to someone who doesn't know the language. English is mysterious symbols to people that don't know English. Oh, yes, I'm watching, and you're welcome for the topic. Okay. My take is that the body of Jesus was both glorified and could present his wounds. Mary Magdalene didn't recognize him at first in the tomb. Well, it's kind of interesting because there are several instances of people not immediately recognizing Jesus when he sees them post resurrection. Now, is that because he actually looks physically different? There's no mention of that in the canon of Scripture. Nowhere does it say, oh, and then Mary realized, oh, it must be Jesus, even though he looks kind of weird. It doesn't say that. Could it be that Jesus projected some kind of blindness onto the people around them so they wouldn't recognize him at first? Possible, but it doesn't say that either. We're left completely in the dark as to why people did not recognize him. But I think what's interesting about what you said here, Darren, and if you're still listening, I would like an answer to this. You make it sound like, okay, there's a difference between a glorified body and a body with wounds on it. Why? And where do you get that from? Because in Scripture, at least as far as I know, nowhere does it actually state that your glorified body is going to not have any kind of scars, not have anything at all other than absolute physical perfection. Nowhere does it say that. That's something that a lot of people have assumed over the years, but and I don't really have. I don't. It's not a hill that I would die on, but I'm just curious as to where you get that from based on your statement. I like the red dwarf. Oh yeah, I didn't mention red dwarf. Sorry. So after the resurrection, Jesus returned in a glorified body, and not just not just his healed human body. Well, apparently yes, but his glorified body still had the wounds. So, go figure. Or even his unhealed human body, although that would have been a bit morbid. Yeah, that would have. That would have literally been the zombie Jesus that many atheists try to use as a joke. So Jesus was no longer human when resurrected. Not necessarily. I mean, it's hard to say. But Jesus is kind of a unique case because Jesus is God. But I think the bigger question is, what are we exactly when we're resurrected? I think we're still human. I think Jesus is more in tune with his godly nature after the resurrection than he was before. But you got to be very, very careful when you tread these waters. There are a lot of people that believe that post resurrection we all become like God, quite literally, that we become, we literally become God. And, that's the one of the foundations of the Mormon faith. But that's also, there are a lot of Christians that believe that we are to become Christs ourselves, and that we will have all the authority and power of Christ in paradise. And nowhere does it say that. So you need to be very, very careful about that kind of thing. As far as what's Jesus's actual nature post resurrection, it never really gets into that in the canon of Scripture, so we don't honestly know. And so I think it's kind of dangerous to speculate too much on that. My own guess is that the glorified bodies will be both spiritual and physical at the same time, just as Jesus is fully God and fully man. I think that you are onto something to at least a point. But I don't know. Is if something is spiritual, and an honest question here, and I don't think that there's a definitive answer to this. But if something is spiritual, does that negate the possibility of it being physical? So, because I've never had a problem with the idea that humans are both physical and flesh, right? But if you look at particularly from a theological standpoint, you look through the text of the Bible and stuff, it would seem that the flesh part of us has been corrupted over time, and the human part, or the spiritual part of us, kind of takes a back seat. But we know, like the spiritual side of us is there, even in the non-believer and stuff. It's when we have a conscience about something, we feel like we know that what the right thing to do in a given situation is, as Paul writes, that the law of Moses is written on the human heart. And so, yes, you are, when people say, well, I'm not a Christian and I'm not a serial killer or anything, I know that it's wrong to kill. Yes, because the law of Moses is written on the human heart. So I think that the spiritual is within us, intertwined with us. But I think that what it seems like to me is that post resurrection, we get new bodies of some kind, and our existing spirit is transferred into this body that is no longer weighed down by the fall of the earth. You asked me for a topic. Wow. Yes, I asked you for a topic, not just a general subject. Let's see. But anyway, I suggested you keep the Christian stuff on one of your channels, one of your other channels. That was all. Yeah, but and I understand. You thought that since this channel was bigger, that I should not do Christian stuff on this channel, which totally understand that. It's a logical thing. Videos just going through your growing 3D printing collection might be popular. Well, that's where, like, with some of what I've been working on lately, because the last couple of weeks, so I don't know if I've talked about this, how much I've talked about this on a stream. So you guys will be, I guess, maybe the first. I've been printing lots and lots and lots and lots of parts. and for my next project that is in line with this 3D print that I made some time ago. You guys may remember this is, obviously the Enterprise refit. And this is at a scale of 1 meter is 2 millimeters in length. So this being the Enterprise refit, which was 300 meters in length, so it would be 600 millimeters or 6 centimeters, or something like that. Or no, not 600 millimeters. It's 1 meter. Let's see, 300 meters. How did I do it? Three. I said, okay, so 10 meters is 2 millimeters. That's what I did. I'm trying to remember the scale. And I'm trying to remember 10 meters equals 2 millimeters scale. Yeah, it's a 1/5000th scale. So since the Enterprise is 300 meters, then you divide that by 10, and you get down to 30, and then you multiply by 2. That's how you get the proper scale. And so this is 60 millimeters long, or 6 centimeters. I knew it was 6 centimeters, but I just was doing the math wrong. Okay, so this 6 centimeter ship represents a 300 millimeter or 300 meter long starship. So that way I could make to scale, of course, the Imperial Star Destroyer, which is 1,600 meters. So that means that it would be, we reduce that we divide by 10, so 160, we multiply by 2, and we end up with 320 millimeters long. And so we can do the comparison, right, of the Enterprise versus the Star Destroyer, both in 1/5000th scale. In addition to that, I have other, like I've done the Battlestar Galactica in the same scale. It's roughly the same size as the Star Destroyer. And for the main event, if you will, I am currently working on a Borg cube at the same scale as everything else. And so, since the Borg cube is 3,000 meters cubed, then that means that, okay, divide by 10, that would be 300 millimeters, multiplied by 2, it would be 600 millimeters or 60 centimeters cubed. And which is bigger than my printer is capable of doing. My printer has a maximum size of 320 millimeters cubed. I designed the Borg cube to be built in quadrants of, so each side of the cube is 4 quadrants. Each of those 4 quadrants, 300 millimeters across. And so when the whole thing is said and done, it will actually be, about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, roughly. Which, by the way, is about the same size as the shooting model that they used for Q-Who and Best of Both Worlds. And so to make the cube, I'm doing it a little differently than they did for the original models for the show. But I'm printing various layers of stuff, right? So here are some various pipings, the cube is known to be covered with. And I have these at different sizes. So this is a smaller pipe, and then these are a little bit thicker. And I don't just lay them on top of each other in a sheet like that. While that could work, I'm trying to make it look a little more like the real thing. And so I'm cutting sections of it out and attaching it directly to the hull of the Borg ship. So, which I'll show you. This is one quadrant of the bottom layer, if you will, of the Borg ship, right? So this is the floor, if you will. On top of this goes this little guy. And so they're designed to actually fit together. So, in fact, you'll notice there are those circles around this, and there are circular notches on this to fit, so that once I'm ready to actually put this thing together, it will actually snap into place pretty sturdily, even without glue, although I'm going to glue it together. And so just putting it together like that. So now we have a second layer on there. So you might say, well, that looks a little weird, right? But keep in mind that number one, I start putting sections of the piping first on the lower layer. Then I put this on top of that. Then on top of this, let's see, that's a bad print there. Where's a good one? Have these little doodads, right? So these little guys are designed to fit on top of that. As you can see, it covers it quite nicely. Okay? So the entire cube will be surfaced like that, and then with the pipes on top, both underneath this, sticking out from underneath, and also on top of it. And the reason for all of these layers, and if I flip this over, you'll see this has these pyramid-like shapes inside of the cutouts from the lower level. Once I have all these printed, I'm going to paint these bright silver in color, because this entire cube will then sit over a lamp that will basically allow light to come in, refract off of here, and then scatter about the surface of the cube. And to give you guys a rough idea, let's see, that one is. So here's one I've been working on a little bit. So this is kind of closer to what it looks like with the actual lattice work on the exterior. And so if we take one of these and we attach it like so, and that's there. Come on. All right. All right, so that's kind of how it looks underneath. And then once I get these covered with the greebles, there'll be another layer of pipes on top of that. And that will be the entirety of the cube. But this is 1/4 of one side. So there you go. That's what I'm currently working on with the 3D printing stuff. And yeah, there is a purpose to all this that's going to get into my first major series of videos on the Salty Plus channel. But I'm trying to do it right, so I don't want to rush into it. It'll launch when it's ready to launch. The religious stuff is going to tank subs, and might as well put on a channel that doesn't have many subs. Anyway, that's Darren's thinking, and it's logical, for sure. Guess you tried the alternative, see if putting religious stuff on a bigger channel would have larger reach. Honestly, there were multiple factors that went into why this channel became the quote unquote religious channel. And some of that I've discussed publicly, some of that I will not. But suffice to say that I have my reasons, and I felt that ethically it was the thing to do. And I do think that ethics trumps practicality. I know that a lot of people think I'm crazy for that, Darren included. That's fine. But I do believe ethics absolutely trumps practicality. That's why I had such a beef with President Trump. It's not because everybody say, well, he wants to secure our borders, and that's a good thing, right? But ethics trumps practicality. And while Trump is certainly, very much into securing the border, and I would say that securing the border is in fact a good thing, that doesn't mean that I support the idea of masked, uncammed police roaming around in unmarked vehicles, taking people without warrants. So, that's just my opinion. Taylor's only changed her own music. Started as country, but she found she made more money with hollow pop music for preteen girls. You know what? I don't know anything about that. I'm not going to knock her because she seems like a nice kid, but at the same time, it's not my kind of music. So, a glorified body without the desires or and hunger suffered by mortal flesh. I think that's a good way to put it. Yes, I think that we will not have necessarily sinful urges, right? Which we all have, right? And so now the question then becomes, and it's a tough question because it's not answered in Scripture. What about sex? Because Jesus eats in the resurrected form, so we know that eating still exists post resurrection. But a lot of people wonder, well, what about sex? It's a fair question because if you're married and all that, I think sex is the greatest gift that God has given mankind. And so it would be a shame for that to not exist in paradise. Now, there are multiple answers to that, one of which is, well, if you're in the presence of God, it will literally be better than sex. So who cares? That's could be a fair point. I don't know what it would be like to literally be in the presence of God. So then there's the idea that, well, Jesus doesn't say anything about sex. He only says marriage. And, the interesting thing about marriage is that marriage has always been, in the Jewish tradition and then in the Christian tradition and stuff, is a lifetime contract, right? Not an eternal contract. And that's something that people need to understand. There's nothing about a biblical marriage that extends beyond one of the two dying. So if a husband and wife are married and the wife dies, the husband is no longer married. That contract is now null and void, which means he can go marry someone else or he can remain single or whatever. So, but he is in effect single. Same thing, obviously, if the husband dies. And there are instances in the Bible of widows who then marry other men, particularly if they don't have children. Because without children, there was no one to support you when you were old because there was no Social Security or pension plans. So, will we have a sex drive? Don't know, because would it be necessary? Will reproduction be necessary in paradise? Probably not, because at least based on what the Bible does hint at, there will no longer be death. And so if there's no death, then there's no need for reproduction. So does that mean that we simply have no desire for sexual relations at all? Or does it simply mean that we don't have this burning desire to spread our genes like is so hardwired into our DNA currently? Don't know. I lean towards the latter, but I don't know. But then even then, so if we do still desires sex, just not at the same level as before. How do we act on that desire? Because Jesus said that we are like the angels, neither married nor given to marriage. And so it sounds like, okay, we won't be married per se, but there's also instances of the angels engaging in sex with humans in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. People love to talk about the Nephilim. So, if the angels clearly were capable of doing it and did do it, it means that they desired it. And so, probably means that we're going to as well, but not just, I think relationships will be defined a bit differently. But we don't know. What we do know is that it seems that we will not have sinful lusts. Robert says, I found a few days ago that there's a new Robocop show coming to Amazon streaming service. Will you and Nerd Fights watch it and have Nerd Fights for it? I'd be willing. I haven't talked to Danny or Mr. Know-It-All about it because I didn't know about it until you just mentioned it. But I'm okay with it. Arabic in the house says, good morning. How you doing? Stan says, just a clip about, yeah, from the financial audit video. I figured. Let's see. You were talking about tithing in the chat because you were talking about tithing. We were talking about tithing in the chat because you were talking about tithing. Sheesh. Why are you saying sheesh? I didn't. Was I griping about talking about tithing? Whatever, dude. You just want to find something to fight about. And when do we ever have enough money? Well, that's the thing. That's one of the reasons. Like the love of money is considered the root of all sorts of evil. Not money itself, but the love of money is like the love of anything else that is not of God. It's never enough. Whether you're talking about money, sex, drugs, whatever it may be, it can never be satiated. No human desire can be. It's just that's one of the reasons. That's why addiction is so destructive, because okay, you have a couple of drinks, feels nice. Let's do that every night. But after a couple of months, that couple of drinks just doesn't do it for me. Well, I'll go from wine to whiskey, and now we're talking. But then, a little bit after that, now the whiskey's not quite doing it. So, where do I go from there? And, for the alcoholic, they just start drinking more and more and more to the point where people that I knew very well and cared about and was worried to death about were drinking a fifth of things like whiskey every single day just to feel normal. And here's the scary thing. This person could drink a fifth of whiskey and you would think that they were sober. That's how addicted to the alcohol they were. So it can't be satiated. It cannot be, enough. There's never enough. In fact, it's like that was that movie with the talking animals, Over the Hedge. And the one fox was like, yeah, because when it comes to humans, too much is never enough. And let's see. And I took that a tad personally. I'm not sure what I supposedly took personally. God's in his back. Good to see you. Darren says, RFK is right. People on EBT shouldn't be using it for junk food. Well, then give them enough money. I look, you can love on RFK all you want. I think the man is an idiot. And putting him in charge of health is an absolute joke. But, whatever. You like him, great. Knock yourself out. But if you want to say that everybody should be eating whole grain organic pasta with organic tomato sauce, and they should be making free range grass fed beef and they should be eating, organically grown free range chickens and organic free range eggs and all this stuff that RFK and raw milk or whatever you're into, right? Great. But guess what? That stuff is expensive as F. And someone on food stamps can't afford it. So you want to complain about them eating junk food when all they can afford is junk food. You know, whatever. They can eat liver. Liver is cheap and it's a superfood. Fine. You want to dictate to everybody who needs help what they should eat. You know, I hope, Darren, that you never find yourself disabled. I truly do. Because I hope you never, and believe me, as a person who is on disability, I hear it from people that, that I shouldn't get as much as I do. In fact, there are some people that think I shouldn't get any assistance at all. That I should only eat, organic foods and all this. And, anytime, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you and your wife actually go out to the movies on date night. And, how terrible is that? Even though you're doing it in a cheap manner because we use the subscription service for AMC, which is a lot cheaper than buying movie tickets. But, how dare us actually go out as husband and wife on a date night a couple of times a week? Oh my gosh, how terrible of us. And by the way, just so you're aware, I've been married to that lovely woman for 32 years. 39 years we've been together. And in all that time, we've never really gone on a serious vacation together. Never. I mean, yes, we've been to, I think, Disneyland twice. Once was our honeymoon, and it was, like, and that was a gift from a friend of the family that gave us the tickets and everything. And then the second time was as a family. But it was like a long weekend. It wasn't like a real vacation, a 2-week trip to go somewhere. I remember when I was a kid. I remember what vacations were like. We went on a family vacation a couple of times a year. Every winter, we went to a cabin in Lake Tahoe. We would stay there for a week. My parents and another family were in together on a timeshare there. It was absolutely beautiful place. During the time of year that we went, there was usually a couple feet of snow on the ground, which was a lot of fun for the kids, and it was just it was a great time. And then during the summer, we would take a family trip, usually some kind of natural wonder kind of thing. Like we've been to Yellowstone a couple of times. We went to New York. We went to, well, gosh, I'm trying to think, several places around the country. Never went out of the country as a family, but my mom's been out of the country a few times on vacation. And with our church, I would go on at least 2 backpack trips every year of my youth. When I say youth, I mean from about 6th grade through high school. So the first backpacking trip was a long weekend. The second backpacking trip was 2 solid weeks, which was a long hike. You would hike generally for like 3 or 4 days, set up camp on a lake for a few days, and then hike back. And so I remember what vacations were like. But yeah, in the last 39 years, that has not been our life. And certainly not now. There's no vacation on the horizon for us. And do I lament about it and complain about it and bitch and moan about it? No. In fact, I don't know that I've ever mentioned that before on this channel. It's just a fact of life. So, yeah, I make lifestyle adjustments because I know I can't make a significant income right now. And that's just the cards that I've been dealt, and I will be content with what I have and deal with it. However, who the hell do you think you are to tell people that they should just eat liver? You know, we should just give the poor people the healthy foods that we don't want, right? Is that what it is? Screw them actually enjoying their food. My God, that's terrible of you. You shouldn't. And by the way, my dad used to love liver when I was a kid. I always thought it was the most disgusting thing ever. I could not stand. You know what? I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a personal thing with liver because I think it's like so freaking nasty. And I'm sorry. You shouldn't be forcing people to eat one specific food just because it's cheap. And you say it's a superfood. Yeah, right now they call it a superfood. What are they? 10 years from now they're going to say liver causes cancer. You know, I'm surprised RFK doesn't say that already. He probably says it causes autism. The only way to defeat the Power Rangers is with cows. I did not know that. I will remember that and try to keep a cow around in case I'm ever attacked by the Power Rangers. Not sure how accurate the stories are, but apparently companies like Pepsi have to reduce the prices for pop and chips because sales have dipped so much since the food benefits restrictions started. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't buy a lot of pop and or chips, so I genuinely do not know if the price has fluctuated at all. I will say that forcing people to not be able to buy that type of food would definitely have a significant impact on them because a bag of chips is cheaper than a bag of organic sprouts, so not to mention tastes better. So maybe we, rather than bitching about people choosing what's affordable and delicious, we work on making better foods affordable and delicious. Ash Williams versus Jason Voorhees. Well, I'm pretty sure Jason is the only unstoppable killer there. So, yeah, he's going to take that one. Might be why also why Pepsi has dropped to number three soda below Dr. Pepper and Coca Cola. What? Because people on welfare don't drink Coke? I mean, don't get me wrong. It may well have something to do with it, but I never heard a thing that says that welfare people prefer Pepsi and wealthier people prefer Coke. That's not a thing in my book, but maybe it's true. I'm a political and call both sides for what they are wrong and they are right. And there is a right wing political that are white only and fight between paganism and Christianity and other ideology and hate Trump. I have no idea exactly who you're. Oh, and you say, and Jewish people. I know that there is some debate about how Trump seems to be in Benjamin Netanyahu's back pocket, so to speak. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't care. I think that the war in Iran is wrong and unprovoked, and that and has nothing to do with my feelings about the Jews. As far as the political right being somewhat fractured right now, that is absolutely true, for good reason. Finally, a significant portion of people who call themselves Republicans are starting to realize the evils of MAGA. And so I don't hate Trump. However, I think the man has put forth a lot of evil in this country. and I am looking forward to him being out of office. I don't hate the man, but his policies, yeah, I'm not a fan. Suggesting junk food prices have been artificially inflated because the majority of people are buying those items. We're getting them for free, which is the reason chips went from $2 a bag to $5 a bag. I don't buy that at all. Because if that were true, then we would also see everything else, the prices would have been stable. But beef prices are through the roof, chicken prices are through the roof, milk, eggs, all these things have gone up astronomically in price. So the fact that chips went from $2 a bag to $5 a bag sucks. But the fact that chicken went from 99 cents a pound to $2.99 a pound also sucks. And the fact that beef went from $1.99 a pound to $10.99 a pound is ludicrous. But that's what we're looking at. So I don't think that it's a junk food thing. Liver is good, and baked beans and molasses almost tastes like candy. Yeah, that is not a particularly healthy diet either. I mean, if your diet is liver and baked beans, I mean, okay, you might thrive, but I don't think that's a particularly healthy diet. And Godson says, got to buy, which I assume means go. Metric, LOL. Yes. One thing you do definitely get used to if you get into 3D printing is the metric system, because everything is in millimeters. And so it's like either adapt to using millimeters or just don't do it. The world is spiritual in a way, but if something is absolutely superior in every way, such as our glorified bodies that doesn't age, is perfect, etc., I think a perfect expression of the natural. Well, but, and this is another thing that I think is kind of an exaggeration thrown on by the church. Do our glorified bodies not age? I don't know that that's necessarily true. Because if that were true, there would be no such thing as the tree of life, which it clearly says in Revelation will be in paradise. And you won't need the tree of life if you're already immortal. I tend to think that you would need to consume from the tree of life on a fairly regular basis, and it like resets your age or something, but don't know for sure yet. And I'm sorry I didn't see this earlier, but thank you so much from Kyle Cullion 2520, a $2 super chat with no note, but thank you so much, Kyle. I didn't even see you leave a comment, but man, that's awesome of you. Thank you. And it was 27 minutes ago, so I feel horrible about it, but thanks, buddy. If you're going to be able to produce your own you're going to be able to produce your own Star Trek soon with all the accurate models. Theoretically, yeah, I suppose if I had a studio and camera equipment and all that. And then Stan says, sex is only for procreation. Every sperm is sacred, and there is no need for reproduction in heaven. Well, that would definitely be the Catholic perspective on things, wouldn't it? I don't know if the Orthodox feel that way. I haven't checked into that. All right, I'm back from what I was doing. Chicken liver is good. You guys are disgusting. There is no cow threat, says Godson. Or it says Aaron to Godson. I like bison better than cow. I think bison's. I like bison as an ingredient, but I like beef better. Duck is better than chicken. Again, agree to disagree there. I mean, it's just a matter of taste. I happen to like chicken better than duck. But maybe it's because when I was a kid, we had chickens and we had ducks. And the chickens were for eating, and the ducks were just to wade around in the pond and look cute. Isn't goose liver used to make, however you pronounce that? I think it is. Thankfully, we don't live in the Taco Bell only world in Demolition Man. Well, you never know. I mean, that might actually be good because Taco Bell and Demolition Man look pretty good. Just like McDonald's is soon to be doing away with their self serve drink refill machines because some bad apple's taking advantage of them. Well, I don't know what that's just like, but I would say this: we don't really need unlimited pop, do we? You know, honestly, the only time I ever drink pop is probably like sometimes when we go to the movies. But most the funny thing is, like the movie theaters have those, those freestyle machines where you can mix and match, like pick your brand of pop and then pick flavor to put in it and stuff. And I usually do like Minute Maid lemonade with some lime in it or something. And the zero sugar, by the way. We'll do the Minute Maid zero sugar lemonade and maybe throw some lime in it. I even there, I don't really have pop. The only time I really have pop is if we meet a friend for lunch once a month, and we if we go to a restaurant that doesn't have anything but basically alcohol and pop, I'll take pop. I won't drink tap water here because tap water here is disgusting. And if they don't age, then what age would we be? Well, yeah, that's another question. Don't really know how that's going to work, do we? Like, how, if, because one thing that's kind of implied, it's not stated explicitly by scripture, but it's kind of implied, is that the innocent children who die get a free pass into paradise. Okay, fair enough. I don't have any qualms with that. I'm not upset about that. However, what I wonder is let's say that someone was 6 months old and died in a car accident. It happens, right? And so when they get to the resurrection, what age will their body be and what level will their understanding be of what's even happening? I think that's an interesting question that we have no answer for. And God said never had goose liver. And you'd say we need to partake of the tree of life, which is probably true, but there is such a thing as 1,000 year reign. Maybe there was only need for the tree of life for 1,000 years. I don't know. No, because the 1,000 year reign. If I'm remembering my events correctly, I could be wrong, so forgive me. I'm not trying to do an expository teaching on Revelation right now, but I believe the 1,000 year reign happens before the resurrection. And so, because after the 1,000 year reign, then Satan is loosed from his prison. He tries one last time to cause all sorts of problems. And that's when the old universe is kind of wiped away and the new universe is put into place. Satan and the false prophet and everybody's thrown into the lake of fire, as are all the resurrected souls that are not accepting of Christ, and then everybody else enters into the new earth after that. So, and that's where we see the description of the city as having the tree of life. So, I would say that it seems like during the 1,000 year reign, life for the rest of us goes pretty much as normal. You guys should listen to the song Picard and Data by Pogo. It's a good song. I think I've heard it, if it's one I'm thinking of. And Wesley Curry here to give us our daily troll. The ashes and the light of Jesus. I don't know what your. Yeah, I don't understand what your point is. The light in your bellies is the vision of the valley Jesus told you to tell. It is the armor of God. It is the word of God. It is the Holy Spirit. That is a nice little chunk of word salad right there, buddy. You want to say something for real, say it. Otherwise, get lost. I'm sorry. Uh, Not you, Wesley, get lost. Yeah. Wesley pops up every now and then, and he usually spouts some random, very random diatribe that's supposed to sound spiritual, I guess. and then disappears and doesn't answer anything. So, you know, I'm not, somebody doesn't want a conversation. I'm not interested in their crap. So if you want to talk about something, Wesley, I'll let you have one more chance. Otherwise, you shall be ignored for the remainder of the live stream. According to the pre-trib rapture teaching, we are already with God before the 1,000-year reign, so it could be just my own eschatology. Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'm not a believer in the rapture. I don't think that that is necessarily biblical. I'm not saying that someone who believes in the rapture is not, can't go to paradise, but I don't think that that's actually a thing. So if you were trying to say, well, according to the pre-trib rapture, we've already, well, I'd say, well, then where our disagreement is on the teaching of the rapture. So let's break that down. It says, I hate that song. Owen Picard's reading the Shakespeare sonnet set to dance music. And then, that's more crap from Wesley. Doesn't make any sense. No. Bye, Wesley. Thank you, Stan. Oh, did you ban Wesley? I'm fine with that, but yeah. Sorry you hate Picard and Data. I don't hate Picard and Data. Are they bots or do people really waste their time trolling? That's a good question. I don't know. Because like Wesley, when Wesley comes on, and he's been here several times before, when Wesley comes on, it does seem really random, right? Like Darren, for example, and even though he seems to have disappeared, but that's Darren's off doing whatever Darren does on a Sunday. And but when Darren comes on and trolls me, while I sometimes find it annoying and everything, I know it's really Darren, right? I don't think that Darren has a bot set to troll me. Although I wouldn't be surprised if right now he's plugging away at ChatGPT to come up with some way to make a bot specifically designed to troll me. However, that being said, yeah, Wesley, I would say good chance is a bot because the stuff that he says is so random, and it's you know what it is? It's the theological equipment. It's the theological equivalent of Star Trek Voyager technobabble. It's just words that sound religious, but they don't really mean anything when put together the way that he's saying them. You know, so there's that. It is what it is. Star Trek Wesley memes flash before my eyes. Just a short timeout, see if he comes back. No problem. If he, and I will tell you, Stan, look, I trust your judgment. And if we have a person who comes on regularly just to troll, not Darren, but a person like Wesley, I have no problem with you perma banning them because Wesley has been here multiple times and every time does the same thing, doesn't talk to anybody, doesn't engage with anybody, just throws these random statements out about how we're all bad and then leaves. And so I have no problem with you just permabanning him the next time he shows up. Wesley Curry is a real person. He is just a troll. Well, then he's not a very good one. I mean, Darren is a good troll. And I hope he's not listening right now because I just complimented him. But no, Darren is a very effective troll because he knows me well enough to know how to get under my skin sometimes. He knows just what button to push at just the right moment sometimes to really get me. And that's why sometimes I have gotten regrettably overly worked up about him. So, yeah, Darren is a very good, very effective troll. Wesley is an absolutely crappy troll because at no point, I mean, a good troll should always garner some kind of significant reaction from the people he's trolling. But basically, the only reaction that Wesley garners from me and honestly most of you guys from the appearances of things is an eye roll. And so that's not very effective trolling. At least Darren trolls on topic. Oh yeah, that's what he does well. He pays attention to what's going on, and he'll throw a trolling statement out there, but he's not doing it in the dark like Wesley did. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the Wesley stuff's random nonsense, exactly. Darren says you sends U-bots. I don't even know what a U-bot is. And Alex is a generous troll. Indeed, Alex is. Alex is kind of funny. I really struggle with him sometimes. Just trying to understand him because on the one hand, he says some things that and I've told him as much that I thought were straight up blasphemy. He said things that I thought were absolutely terrible things to say, especially as a person professing a belief in Christ. But then he super chats me. And I'm like, well, how can I not like someone who's giving me money considering that I'm a greedy bastard and all? So I really struggle with this guy because, on the one hand, he says all sorts of terrible things to me. And on the other hand, he gives me money. So if you're going to troll me, that's the way to do it. My own eager wish is that we could get married in heaven due to the wording of Jesus when he questioned the Pharisees. The angels did leave their first estate, then the angels don't reproduce anymore. But maybe things will change in the future. Well, except that keep in mind that in that passage, they are specifically talking about the resurrection. And so it's not like he says, oh, well, this is how things are going to start, you know. Let's see. Let's see. And yeah, Matthew 22. Let's go there. And just for fun, all right, marriage. Okay, here we go. Marriage at the resurrection. So we'll see if we can get this to work here. All right, good. All right, so that same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, which, by the way, just so you know, so there's the Pharisees, everybody knows them. The Sadducees were also religious experts, higher ups in the Jewish community, but they were like a different sect. You know, it'd be like saying the Methodists and the Baptists. And the Sadducees specifically do not believe that the resurrection is a thing. So it would be like if the Baptists showed up because they're talking about infantile baptism or something, so in which the Baptists are hardcore against. That's what defined their denomination originally. Okay, who say there's no resurrection came to him with a question. Teacher, they said, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for him. Now that, just so you know, is true. According to Jewish law, and keep in mind this is Jewish law, this is not binding to Christians, but if a woman dies or if a husband dies before having an heir, then if the husband had a brother, that brother is then obligated, assuming he's not married, to marry the widow, so that at least until she has an heir, because without that she would have no support system later in life. So that is actually 100% true, which is kind of weird, but that's the way the law was for the Jews. Now, there were 7 brothers among us. The first one married and died. Since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother. The same thing happened to the second and third, right down to the 7th. Finally, the woman died. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be of the 7, since all of them were married to her? Now that is actually a really intriguing question. Because, for example, there are millions upon millions of people in the United States alone who have had multiple marriages and indeed either were or become Christians later in life. And so when they die, are they married to their first spouse, their second spouse, their last spouse? Who gets them in heaven? That is a it's an interesting and legitimate theological question for Jesus. Now they're trying to trap him because, of course, they want to, they're non-believers as far as the resurrection at all. So they're just basically trying to say something that contradicts himself. Jesus replied, "You are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. But about the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what God has said to you? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." And so that's basically one thing that because he's affirming that in the Old Testament, Yahweh says that he is the God of the patriarchs, right? So he's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and all that. And if and what Christ is trying to say is that, well, he's not the God of dead people, so that means that those people are in fact still alive. And that's just to try and show some theological evidence that there is a resurrection. And then, of course, the other part is to say that, well, as far as marriage is concerned, it don't exist in the resurrection. And hence the marriage vows being till death do we part. And so at the point of death, that marriage contract is over. Which, unless you happen to, I think Mormons believe in an eternal marriage contract. But Mormons aren't really Christians, so there's that. It gets a bit messy when you have multiple wives in life. Well, not really. Jesus, I think, makes it pretty clear. I don't have any proof of my guess, but I think maybe there's some wiggle room for it. They were the un-Pharisees. I am going to use that. I love that. The Orthodox Church is celebrating Jesus' resurrection right now. They will do it do it last through month. I assume you mean through the month. So throughout the month of May. Okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. You want to celebrate it for a month, go right ahead. I'm not going to quibble with you on that, and I'm certainly not going to quibble with you on the date because the fact is we don't use the same calendars that they used back then, and so the date is likely off for everybody that's tries to. Oh, well, we know what it is. No, you don't. We have an approximate date. Anyone else hungry? Because I want fried chicken. Good idea.